and welcome to my channel. I'm Mandi Grace, author of 10 young adult novels so far, 8 of which I'm rewriting this year, but that's unrelated to this video. I have been reading one book on writing craft or professional development every month for a year and a half now, and now that it's the middle of April, it's time for me to pick my April book and start reading it. Not those, I've already read those, but this is what we've got. There's also those, but I decided after I read The Emotion Thesaurus, which I love and I use every time I write, I decided it really wasn't enough to warrant a video of its own, so I kind of feel like these I will read off camera. I don't know, tell me if you want me to read them on camera, but I'm planning on reading them off camera. So, this is what we've got. Saving this one till like August, September time so that I can get back into the fantasy mindset for November NaNoWriMo, which will be book 4 in my King Arthur series. The rest I have no opinion on whatsoever. So, maybe we should do edit ready. I'm editing, well, I feel like I'm drafting because the rewrites are like doubling and tripling the books in size, so most of it's new content, so I feel like I'm drafting. But I'm technically editing right now and will be for most of the year until November, so we should do this one, huh? Edit Ready by Harry Dewulf. Dewulf? Yeah. Okay, I'm not very far into this yet. I've just been reading the opening sections, where he's discussing what the book is and how to use it. But I thought the interesting thing that I had to turn on the camera for, was when he was discussing how he's constantly adding to and revising the, whole thing. And he says there's more than 2 editions every year. That's ridiculous. Anyway, he also discussed that there's 3 ways that you can use the book. Number 1 being to read it straight through, which is what I'm going to do at least the first time around here on the vlog. And then a reference to use while writing, because that's basically what it is, I guess. I haven't actually gone through it yet, but that's what it is. Or a reference to use while self-editing, which seems like the same thing, but sure, whatever. So yeah, I guess if I find it useful during the read-through, I might have it on hand as a reference point as I edit the Robin Hood series that I'm currently rewriting and editing and whatnot. Okay, he opened his discussion on narrative voice with a quote from Jane Austen, so I'm sold. Okay, he's talking about tenses now. I moved into the lounge room to get away from the noises of the children in the house. But anyway, talking about tenses, and this part really made me laugh. Changing tenses within the book. If you know you are a master of writing tenses, then you can choose to narrate some of the action in the past tense and some of it in the present. If you are reading this, you aren't a master, so pick one tense and stick with it. Okay, several word choice things that I have noticed. First and foremost, I learned a new word, discreet. Not discreet, mind you, which I already knew, but discreet. Just moving an E around. Yeah, I had to look that one up. We're talking about the basic units of narration, so words, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, whatever. Anyway, he said, at different levels of abstraction, the objectives work in different ways, but you will find that they are always discrete, always definable. And I was like, huh? So I had to look it up. Looked up discrete. And then we turned the page, and I think it's three times in a row. Choose, yeah. 3 times in a row he spelled choose with a U, and I was dying. It's probably a British thing, but I was just dying inside. Also, I looked it up to see if it was a British thing, and what came up was an archaic spelling of the word choose, and I was like, okay, that's a choice. If it is just the British spelling, like, okay, fine, whatever. I'll get over it. People spell words differently, it's fine. I'm not gonna lie, though, that really knocked me out of his whole paragraph. I was not paying attention anymore. I was cringing and dying inside. We're talking about what he's calling register seepage, which is when your narrator's voice starts to sound like your character's voices, basically. But he gave an example about a heroic fantasy set in quote-unquote the Forgotten Realms, where everyone says unto instead of to, and wherefore instead of why, and you get an awful lot of Yoda speak, blah blah blah. Okay, I didn't really disagree with anything he said until the very end when he said, it's all too easy for the author to get swept up along with the characters to the point where he uses unto in the narration. And atop. I'm sorry, sir. Atop is a perfectly normal word. I use that all the time in my normal life, not just in writing. What do you have against atop? Look at this. He's so disturbed by it, it has its own sentence. He does actually have an explanation about it, which only added more confusion because I did not know what a bugbear was. I kind of guessed, based on the context, that it'd be something like a pet peeve, and then I looked it up. An imaginary being invoked to frighten children, typically a sort of hobgoblin supposed to devour them. What? Also, why is it okay to say here and now instead of here and now? I don't understand this writer at all. I cannot get behind his vernacular. I just can't. I don't understand when he's mocking perfectly good words. I don't understand when he's just casually using nonsense. Like, I don't understand. Also, let's note, he had to explain what here and now means because he didn't say here and now. He's making fun of my vocabulary again. He's talking about, using, language to set the feel of the book or whatever, if you're writing historical fiction or fantasy or whatever. And he talks about, reasons why it fails and reasons why it works. He says things like it'll succeed if you slave over every single line, or if you are J.R.R. Tolkien, or like various things. But anyway, then he was giving examples of things that just don't work, or that are the reasons that readers will notice what you are trying to do. And his first example is for in place of since, because, and as. Seldom works outside of a poetic register. I'm sorry. I use that like normally. Like that's ugh. Here's what I'm starting to understand. Because I grew up reading mostly old books. So, you know, Austen, Bronte, Dickens, whatever. And really enjoying them. Not just reading them, like, in school, quote-unquote, but, like, really reading them, like, for pleasure. All the time. I think my normal day-to-day use of language, and also the way that I write, probably more specifically the way that I write, because I have always written more intelligently than I speak. Most times I think I sound like an idiot when I open my mouth to talk, but if I express the same thought writing, it actually says what I'm trying to say. Anyway, the point being, yeah, I guess I'm seeing the influence of my reading choices on the way that I speak and write, which is apparently too archaic for this person. He doesn't think it's a good idea. Oh, here's another one. Examples of things that don't work. Preposition proliferation. Oddly, this happens a lot when seeking an olden daisy register, and yet in the past people used far less prepositions. Here's an example. Land became visible, if but only in shades of gray. I kind of like that sentence, I'm not gonna lie. I would write that sentence. Me and Harry Dewulf are just we're not getting along, but not in a bad way. So when I first read Story Genius by, what's her name, Lisa Cron, we did not get along because I felt she was very condescending and patronizing and quite frankly rude. So, you know, I didn't get along with Lisa Cron when I first read the Story Genius book. This one I'm not, like, offended by. I'm just highly entertained every single page by something he says that is not necessarily at odds with the way that I write and speak, but just sort of different enough that it's entertaining me. It's entertaining. Entertaining, yes. enough to make me want to change the way that I speak or write. Not yet. He hasn't said anything that's made me go, wow, you're right, I should fix that. He has an interesting discussion on subplots not in fact being what we all think of as subplots, and that those are side plots, whereas subplots is hidden events that actually have consequences in the storyline, even if we're not seeing it. A subplot to him is a plot that is working alongside the actual plot, even if the reader doesn't see it until like later in the story, which was fascinating. Given that subplot is so generally described the other way, I'm gonna say this is a personal problem of his. This man doesn't like maps. I love maps. Books with maps are my favorite. Many writers would be tempted to include a map. Opinions differ as to whether this is a good idea. Opinions differ, in quotation marks, is a polite way of saying that this is a significant source of flame wars. Many readers will take pleasure in pondering over a map, but only once they have read the story. Others will take pleasure pondering over a map, whether they have read the story or not. Others will decide that the book is not for them merely on the presence of the map. Why? Because it tells them that they have yet another fantasy world to learn. Listen, as a fantasy reader, it is not a put-off to have a map. It's exciting. What is wrong with this person? Okay, I found something that I actually really like on the section on dialogue. There's a part where he's talking about dialogue tags, which are always a tricky thing. And he says, speech tags should only serve two purposes: to prevent confusion, as in who's talking, and to reinforce characterization. What they shouldn't be used for is saying how people's voices sound when they speak. I appreciated that. This is kind of something that I struggle with anyway. Dialogue tags, man. I either make them too flashy or I just don't use them, and then people were like, who's talking? And I'm like, I don't know. Also, this random rule, which I'd not heard before but makes a lot of sense. A paragraph containing both speech and non-speech should not have non-speech before and after the speech. The inverse is fine. So he has two examples here. I don't get it, Brad frowned and started pacing about. It just doesn't make any sense. You can do that, but you can't do, Brad was confused. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, he said. He started pacing about. I can see what he's getting at. The second one definitely bugs me. This just made me laugh, so I'm going to read it to you. As for direct speech, I am a firm believer in double quotes, and I have a more than passing admiration for the American rule of putting them after all other punctuation at the end of a line. This usually results in a cleaner looking text. He's talking about his bugbears again. In this case, the word disinterested being used with uninterested, and I can see what he's saying. Also, it just really amuses me. Also, he definitely called out Americans. Maybe not just Americans. He was very broad. He said North America, but, yes. All this is to say that there's a strong formalized difference between uninterested and disinterested, but that at the moment, especially in North America, it is very common for people to use the latter when they mean the former. This misuse is non-trivial, because there are common use cases for both words, and sometimes the distinction between them is critical to clear expression. He's very passionate about this. I'm back. This is going to be a very strange video to edit, I feel, because I haven't been filming the usual, like, me turning pages, me reading, you know, stuff to stick in between me talking. Yeah, I haven't filmed any of that for this, so it's just going to be a lot of me talking with no breaks in between. It's going to be confusing. Maybe I will film some of that extra, like, B-roll stuff just to place in the middle. Maybe I won't, and I'm sorry. Anyway, what I actually got on here to say is I came across something that I don't understand at all. Like, not even a little bit. I don't know if this is a formal grammar thing, so I don't understand it, because honestly, I don't know all the names and rules of things, like, not at all. My understanding of grammar is instinctual from reading and writing a lot. Or this could just be, like, you know, a British thing, and I don't get it because I'm not British. Anyway, I'm going to read it to you. He's talking about different ways misusing words. There's, like, categories, I guess, in his mind. And one of the categories Sorry, Ruby's coughing a lot back there. One of the categories is borderline usage. Borderlines can often be YKB, whatever that means, in all caps, and you are welcome to shout STET, S-T-E-T, in quotation marks. Have no idea what that means. Borderlines can often be YKB, and you are welcome to shout STET in these cases. What does that sentence mean? Please someone answer it. I don't know if I have any, like, British viewers, but if I do, and you know what this means, please tell me. Okay, I will happily forgive him for everything else because he just quoted The Princess Bride. We're friends now. It's great. He's talking about the causes of misuse. So he's discussing how we learn language at all. He says there's 3 things. Repeated encounters with the word, and then basically the more we hear it and the context around which it is used, we slowly understand what it probably means. Another one is trying out the words with others to see if they understand it the way that we do. Just sneaking it in there, see how people respond. And the third one he has is narrowing down the meaning through regular usage. And then he says this, which is why I turn on the camera again. Some people artificially add a 4th, looking up the word in the dictionary. Doing this too soon will not help you, in all caps. I'm sorry, but looking up the meaning of words is definitely what I do. I mean, the others as well, in conversation with people, but like, I definitely look up words. He called one of his bugbears a pet hate. Not a pet peeve, a pet hate. The difference in the language. There's a language barrier here. It's not a big one, it's a small one, but it's enough that I notice it. I think I do this one. Pet words are exotic or unusual words that the writer either unconsciously or coincidentally uses rather too much during 2 or 3 chapters at a time. Sometimes they are recent discoveries or rediscoveries. Sometimes they really are favorite words. Usually it is enough for the editor to raise the writer's awareness. I feel like I have some pet words and phrases. I feel like a recent one is the word knoll, because my family plays lots of silly word games these days, which is, you know, kind of fun in its own way. But there was one particular day when my brother pointed out that the word was something that I would use in the type of stories that I write, which is like medieval fantasy stories. And he's not wrong, but like, since that day that he said, this is a Mandi Grace word, I can't say the word hill. Like, I can't say it. I have to say knoll, and then my brain is just like, I know there's a simpler word for this. Why have I said knoll like 10 times in a row? You broke my brain. We're talking about fights now and doing your research. Currently in the section called Swords, Do's and Don'ts. It's interesting stuff, but the part that I'm enjoying is that he's discussing how not killing someone is actually harder than killing someone. And he says, if you actually land a blow with any kind of weapon, it is very difficult not to do fatal injury. It takes a lot of practice at killing people to avoid killing people. I definitely use italics for this. Not often. It's sparing. And it's always in dialogue. If the characters stress one word. But I do this. And I don't like shouting. People don't shout. Sometimes they just put a little bit of emphasis on it. Well, we did it. We finished this strange little book. I don't know if I did or did not learn anything, but I was amused through most of it.